And you see this Cathar soul who has transfigured himself into a being of light, ascending through the starry realms in this channel or portal of light. And so that was one of the most important things that I learned there, was that there's this whole missing piece in the Cathar story about their belief in these, what we would today call stargates, or what they refer to as channels of light or portals of light.
Interesting. Well, then we'll talk about that a little bit, because I enjoyed your lecture on DVD about wormholes and whether or not the ancient Egyptians or early Christians or anybody else would have had access to these parallel universes, these wormholes, this spiritual alchemy of which you speak, and we'll explore that coming up next hour with William Henry on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. So I guess in one way we'll never know for sure whether or not the ancient Egyptians had access to wormholes, but I guess it leads open the possibility that one of these days they could pierce the space-time continuum and just kind of show up here and prove it, right?
I love it, Ian. Yeah, that's great. I mean, there is always a promise that these beings will one day return, and so it's really incredible, though. I mean, my basic premise, Ian, is that when you look back at this artwork, particularly, say, at Abydos in Egypt, where you find the incredible artwork in the Chapel of Osiris there that portrays what appears to be some kind of an ancient particle accelerator on one wall, and then on the opposite wall you see the transformation or transfiguration of the king, the Pharaoh Seti, into a being of light as he's going through this wormhole. You're looking at this and saying, wow, it looks like we've awakened, if you will, or returned to a level of intellect where we can understand what this imagery is saying. And the benefit of looking back is that today we have such a focus on technology that we're going to use our technology to, in a sense, conquer nature. And what we find is that the ancients had a very different approach to it. They focused on the spiritual connection that they had with nature and the transformation of themselves. They knew that this human flesh and bone is not going anywhere relative to wormholes. We're not going to open a wormhole like in the movie Stargate or Contact that a human being can actually travel through. Not going to happen.
Okay, but why not? I mean, why can't, if you say, I mean, if in a world of possibilities, why do you say that can't happen?
Well, I mean, they talk about the incredible energy that's present in the exotic matter that is present in these wormholes, and that would just literally rip the human body apart. And I also say that because invariably when you're looking or reading about depictions in the ancient world of the quote-unquote gods who are accessing or utilizing these gateways, they are typically not in flesh and blood form. They are undergoing a transformation preparatory to this experience, sort of like Elijah before he goes into the whirlwind. He transmits the knowledge of that whirlwind to his priest, Elisha. And in fact, that image of Elijah's whirlwind is one of the key symbols of the Cathars as well. And they connected the transfiguration of Elijah into a being of light with the light ship of Isis, and they connected it with that column of glory, the column of light, which I wanted to mention also that they also called that column the Christ column.
Well, that's interesting, and I'll get back to that, but I guess I'm still not quite certain then what we're talking about, and only because I mean, I think this is infinitely interesting, if you pardon the term, that what you're suggesting is that anybody that would have been able to have utilized the ancient ability to go into a wormhole would have had to have, somehow purified their physical body or dehumanized their physical self in some way that would have made them it's not able to travel through that? Or
yes, it's not, in fact, a dehumanizing process, Ian. It's rather they think of it as an ultra-humanizing process. They think of this as the next step. Again, they think of the human body as a caterpillar, and
right.
We're in a pupal form. And that what we're going to one day do is utilize this body for perhaps what they claimed is intended purpose for it, to act as a sort of a ladder or stairway for the soul to return to its source. And in this scenario, this body is an intermediate form, and in fact, it is a step in the process of becoming a light being. In Tibet, they call this the Great Perfection, where the lamas learn the process whereby they can alter the vibration of their body and transfigure themselves into a vortex of energy and then travel the cosmos. It's very interesting that the Cathars claim that much of their knowledge came from the East, and they upheld their masters as the perfecti, aligning them with the great perfection tradition of Tibet and suggesting that maybe that's what the Cathars were practicing, is this same tradition of altering the vibration of the body and turning it into a being of light.
Okay, but if the ancient Egyptians could really do this, or the Cathars for that matter, could really travel through these wormholes or perfect themselves so physically that they could bend space and time, if you will. I mean, that whole concept, kicks such historical ass that you can't even begin to put your mind around it, except to say, why did they disappear? If they came to have this great ability, why do they quote unquote die off? And why don't we have them here still?
Ian, they were exterminated by the Catholic Church in the first European genocide. As many as 1 million men, women, and children Cathars were burned in cathedrals en masse by the Catholic Church to prevent this knowledge from being propagated. The Tibetans who possess this knowledge are persecuted by the Chinese. It seems that whenever this revelation is coming forward, there is an opposing force, a force of darkness, if you will, that seeks to prevent this knowledge from being shared by the general populace. And over again, when you see it, you find genocide attached to it.
Well, I'm not sure I'll go with you on the idea that I know the Cathars were pursued as part of
history.
I get it. I don't know about a million. But I'll go with you because I know it. I know it happened. I just don't know about a million in the cathedrals. But that having been said,
why not the mass? They take 10,000 people and pack them, men, women, and children, in a cathedral and burn them, just like we're burning babies in Darfur today. The church did this in the 13th century. And this is why even when you go to France today, there is still residual impact from that. People don't want to talk about this for fear of retaliation.
Well, I'm happy to talk about it. I guess what I'm saying is, even if we predate all of that, we go back to the Egyptians, what happened to the Egyptians? That predates any sort of organized...
The Egyptians had a 5,000-year-old civilization.
Right.
And civilizations tend to die out. I can't explain, maybe there was over the course of time, these teachings simply dissipated. People forgot. I mean, that's kind of the rap that's made on our civilization. We have all this great stuff, but we've really forgotten who we are as beings of love and light, and we have a civilization based on suffering and terror and things like this, instead of a culture and a civilization that's based upon the upholding of the individual and the self, and the ultimate possibility that we can become these ascended beings. And so maybe just over time, the 5,000-year-old civilization like Egypt, these ideas just sort of people forget over time. The other explanation, Ian, is really interesting, even more than that. It's that we live in a galaxy that experiences time cycles where we go through periods of light and periods of darkness, and we're leaving presently a period of darkness and entering, according to many, an era of light. And perhaps that's why these teachings are becoming so readily available today.
The subject, the idea of these ancient technologies is one of your DVDs, and it's very interesting how you use the ancient images and build on those using computer and sort of, I guess, 3D type imaging from your partner on that. You go into detail about the Temple of Solomon as a kind of its own sort of accelerator, isn't it?
Well, it's such a bizarre idea that when you have this incredible revelation that occurs in the 1st century A.D.,